Welcome to the Catapult Effect, a podcast where professionals like you turn challenges into opportunities for extraordinary growth. If you're tired of struggling, feeling lost, and ready to catapult yourself into the best version of you, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Katie Wrigley.
Welcome to the Catapult Effect podcast. And whoo, that was a mouthful for me to say for the first time. So as you guys are well aware, I've just renamed the podcast as we are getting into a new season focused on everything that you need to help you alchemize your challenges into growth and propel yourselves forward. So my guest that I have with me is someone very special to me today. He has been a huge help on my own wellness journey, and he is an amazing wealth of knowledge. He really understands the ins and outs around the human body and how to fuel it most effectively for your goals. So I'd like to introduce you to Casey Ruff, the co-owner of Boundless Body. Welcome to the Catapult Effect podcast, Casey.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's always such a joy to chat with you. We always have great conversations, and I really enjoyed the session that you and I did together where you took me through a cognitive therapy session that was very impactful in my life. So I really appreciate you and all your work.
Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate you as well. You've been a huge help to me on my own wellness journey, like I said. And yeah, excited to have you back. So Casey had actually done an episode with me in season 1. And I wanted to bring him back again as we're looking through this with a new lens in 2024 and really helping you move forward again to alchemize these challenges into growth. So Casey, would you mind just giving a little bit of your background to the audience so they know who you are and how you got into what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So originally, as I was thinking about what I was going to do for a career, I was studying architecture in high school and college. I thought that was going to be my career route. As I was, in college for architecture, I joined a gym where I started to watch personal trainers interact with their clients. And I thought it looked really interesting. And so I decided to go into the manager's office and see what certifications I need, at least temporarily, to be a personal trainer. I didn't think that was going to be my career by any means, but just thought it looked fun and a good way to earn some money. I also saw that the personal trainers were using heart rate monitors, polar heart rate monitors at the time, which is a tool that I had been using at that time for many years previous to that and knew quite well. And so I ended up getting certified as a personal trainer. And that was back in March of 2007. So I've now been doing this for about 17 and a half years. Obviously, you start out with some, basic personal training certifications. And as you go, you get more, certifications and more knowledge. Eventually, I became, certified in different ways to measure people's metabolism, which is called a metabolic cart, a tool that we use to measure how somebody is burning their calories, and not only how many calories they burn, but where their calories are coming from, versus like fat versus carbohydrates, essentially. And also I got my nutrition certification along the way so I could really try to help people with their nutrition and with their journey. We were coming across a lot of people who, were very busy. They were wealthy enough to come to the gym that I was working at, which was really nice and big. They just didn't have a lot of time available. They were, usually high performing people and, needed to really optimize their health and their performance and what they were doing and try to show up for their families and all that stuff. And so we had to really learn how to help people optimize. I love the word alchemize, by the way. I might be stealing that. I think it's a great way to say it. Yeah, I think it's great. But yeah, it's been a lot of years of, getting certain advice about things and giving that to clients and having varying degrees of success. Which, my training and my experience eventually led me to finding other ways of helping people. In fact, basically like finding really unconventional ways of helping people eat properly and even exercise differently that ended up producing really fantastic results. And so a lot of the work I do today goes against what I learned in a lot of my certifications. It's especially my nutrition coaching certification, but through that kind of unconventional way of doing things and helping people, you find that it can actually really help people, instead of what I was doing before, which is giving people advice that may not have been great, but you turn around and blame the people for not doing a very good job following your, what ended up being really crappy advice. So anyway, it's a great career. It's something I absolutely love. We started our business during the pandemic when my wife and I were both unemployed. We started the, Boundless Body and just continued training our people and doing nutrition coaching with people, not only in our neighborhood and in our city, but all over the world. So it's been quite the journey for sure.
Awesome. And so I was kind of giggling as you were saying, what you do now goes against what you had learned in the early days, because we're starting to see more and more, and I know you're much more tuned into this than I am, but we're starting to see all this stuff about how bullshit the food pyramid is, the one that we've been taught our whole lives. So can you kind of speak to what you used to be an advocate of and what's changed and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll have you know also that I just got back from teaching a nutrition seminar here in my neighborhood, a fun thing I'm doing in the summer around here. And on my paper that I made for the outline today, I did include the picture of the food pyramid. Fantastic. So I'm really glad you brought that up. It's really fresh in my mind.
It's coming up over and over again, and so much that I listen to and absorb, and I'm like, all right, we're just going to call it out here because you're such a great expert to be speaking to the flaws in that pyramid and what you've adapted for your clients and what you're seeing as a result.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess the way I was trained as a nutrition coach is the way that most people are trained as a nutrition coach. And I will say too that I'm not a registered dietitian, so I don't have 6 years of a formal education. I have a textbook and a certification that I need to pass off that gives me a piece of paper that says I know something about nutrition. There's obviously advantages and disadvantages to that. A registered dietitian has, letters behind their name and a certain accreditation that I don't have, but I can also, I'm not beholden to the same rules and regulations that a registered dietitian is. So basically, the nutrition certification that I got is known as one of the most prestigious that you can get for nutrition coaching. And it is a lot of helping people understand how to combine quote unquote healthy foods like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, and lean proteins, and how to portion them out, and how to make sure you get a balanced diet and you're getting all of those different food sources. And then a typical coaching session would be talking primarily about behavior and behavior change. So if somebody came to me and they wanted to start nutrition coaching, we'd figure out what level they were at and where they wanted to start. We might give them some recommendations. And every 2 weeks, they would come in and tell me basically why they had failed, why they hadn't lived up to what we said. And we would do behavior coaching with them and tell them like, oh, well, were you writing in your nutrition and emotional journal as much as we told you to? Were you meal planning the way that we told you to? Did you get, all the different kinds of vegetables we wanted you to get in a week? Were you able to control your portions of fat, or did you eat the dessert on Thursday night? Why did you do that? We need to talk about that. And so it ended up being this kind of like wheel of a pattern of coaching somebody where you basically could coach them for an endless amount of time, because you could always find something that they didn't do perfectly and people felt like they were failing and they felt like they were running out of willpower. The way that our nutrition journey has been in, in particular in the United States, that led us to, creating the food pyramid in the 1990s, was basically this obsession that we had that really like came around saturated fats in our diets. And, in the 1950s, heart attacks had risen from almost nowhere a few decades earlier to become the number one leading killer in America. And as a country, we were really hungry for answers, and we really wanted to figure out what was the cause of heart disease in particular. President Eisenhower, people may remember, also suffered a heart attack and was out of the Oval Office for a few weeks trying to deal with that. We all remember what it was like when, President Trump had COVID and he was out of the office, what a stir that made. So this was a problem that was increasing, and there were some ideas at the time of what the cause was, but the primary kind of idea that won the day was that saturated fat was causing cholesterol numbers to rise in people's blood, and that cholesterol was clogging up our arteries. I think anybody who thinks of a heart attack thinks of that phrase, like clogging your arteries, where if you dump grease down a pipe and it's cold, it congeals and hardens and becomes this blockage. And, there were other ideas about heart disease at the time that were viable options for maybe what the cause was. It could have been, that we were eating more carbohydrates and sugar. We were more stressed out at the time. We lived in cities more than we were living in rural areas. Stress was much higher. Obviously, smoking, we now know, is a huge cause of heart disease that was largely ignored at the time. But we really, again, got obsessed with whatever easy answer we could figure out and what we could chase as far as a cure for heart disease. And that became saturated fat. Ever since that happened, we had, whole kind of associations like the American Heart Association, which recommended replacing your saturated fats for polyunsaturated fats, which were vegetable oils, and eating more of that so that you could drop your cholesterol. Much later, the U.S. government got involved and started recommending a very similar guidance and followed the American Heart Association's recommendations. We all survived the low-fat 80s and 90s and the snack wells generation and eating food that tasted terrible. And so they had to add more sugar back into it to make it taste palatable. And it brings us all the way to the 1990s when we came out with the food pyramid, where we were literally recommending that people consume 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, 3 to 4 servings each of fruits and vegetables every single day, and controlling things like saturated fat and meat and changing the meat that we were eating, namely eating more chicken and poultry and less of the red meat. And that's kind of how that whole thing started. And what really happened, we notice, is if we look at curves of chronic diseases like obesity, like type 2 diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of them like really fit this nice kind of pattern that when we started changing our dietary recommendations and started making these shifts, all of these problems started to become worse and worse in America. And now we live in a country that spends the most on healthcare per capita than any other, and yet we have the worst outcomes in healthcare. It's assumed, based on recent studies, that about 88% of the population is metabolically unhealthy. We have, almost a 50% obesity rate projected in only just a few years. We've got type 2 diabetes on the rise. Prediabetes is so ubiquitous these days. We used to call type 2 diabetes adult onset diabetes because the kids wouldn't get it, and now they do. So we have a real problem in this country. And, when we look to some of these voices in our community, the government and the American Heart Association and, the Harvard School for Nutrition and Tufts University and all these agencies that are making recommendations and asking them to help give us information that can help our health, it's really been an abject failure. And we've just gone down the wrong path, and now we're paying the price greatly for it. And it's really, really unfortunate.
And I love that you brought that up, because I recently shifted my diet again. I read this book, Always Hungry, by Dr. David Ludwig, who came out of Harvard, and he was saying how little money he got for the dietary stuff that he wanted to look at when he was getting grants together, but something else, I don't remember what it was, and I don't want to muck it up, but something that was more going to feed into the profit of the government, he got millions. But the diet, he could barely scrape together anything for it. And so what are you recommending now? And I was kind of giggling as you said the food pyramid, because from the neck up, my brain loves carbs. It's from the neck down, my body hates it. My taste buds in my brain are like, oh, give me the flour, give me the sugar. But my body down is like, does not. And it took me almost 50 years to get that. I'm like, oh, okay. It's the neck up likes that shit. The neck down, where we need things to function, not so much. So what's changed?
So for me in my kind of journey, we were using those metabolic carts to determine how somebody was using their calories. And we would typically work with people who wanted to lose weight. And we found that if we manipulated the diet, we could get somebody not only to burn more calories all the time in almost like a rested state where they weren't doing anything, but we could also help their bodies burn off their fat energy, which most of us have too much of anyway. We store it as an energy source, and it should be, yeah, right. We all want it gone. Get out of here. And that's why we store it. We have plenty of it. Even, the Tour de France just ended, and these cyclists are emaciated and have hardly any body fat, but they can still live for several days without eating because they still have so much body fat on them. That's one of our fuel sources. The other fuel source is carbohydrates. And we can use either one of them, but we found that more people would lose fat and lose weight if they train their metabolism to burn more calories and then take a greater percentage of those calories from fat. And we learned that if we ignored the kind of standard advice to eat lots of servings of carbohydrates and really focus the diet more on the proteins and fats and the natural ones that we always have consumed as humans, namely animal products like beef and ruminant animals that are a perfect combination of fats and proteins, that somebody could lose weight really quickly. And their cholesterol might go up in the blood, but there was seemingly no other side effects that they had, and they weren't dying of heart disease, which was quite interesting at the time. So pushing down that kind of path eventually led me to the low carbohydrate space, where there was this subset of people that were limiting the amount of carbohydrates they were eating and were getting a great percentage of their calories from fat. And they were seemingly doing very healthy, basically ignoring the standard advice that we were getting. So chasing that down eventually led me to discover what we know is ketogenic diets. A very popular one is the keto diet, which is a specific kind of recommendation around how much fat to consume, but more understanding the process of ketogenesis and how that works in the body, not necessarily necessarily learning that people need to, eat tremendous amounts of fat, but just that they should be in a metabolic space of burning fat, which then creates ketones in the body, which is an alternate fuel that the body really loves and appreciates. And that eventually led me to another subset of the population who were eating what is called a carnivore diet. And a carnivore diet is kind of what it sounds like, where basically people are not only eating a very low amount of carbohydrates, they're abstaining from carbohydrates altogether, which when you do that, you're abstaining from all plant foods. And the only thing you have left is animal foods. And so there were people out there really eating only the most forbidden foods, especially like red meat and fatty meat and lots of salt. And you see, I remember the first interview I ever heard where I heard somebody doing this, and his name is Dr. Sean Baker, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I'm listening to this guy. He's in his 50s. The dude is jacked out of his mind. He's in really, really good shape. He's talking about how he's doing deadlifts and doing rowing competitions in his 50s and setting world records and PRs. And all he's doing is eating ribeyes for all of his meals. And he was saying things at the time like, I don't even really pay attention to my blood work that much. I just feel really great. And so I just am continuing to do this. I turned that episode off halfway through because I thought it was absolutely absurd. It wasn't until like last year that I went through and like re-listened to the whole episode. And this is after I like got certified through his company, ironically. Kind of weird, but yeah, I thought it sounded interesting and it was something I wanted to try. And so in April of 2019, I decided to do what a lot of people do, which is give it a 30-day trial. Basically, I didn't have a lot of carbohydrates in my diet, but I didn't know whether I was going to live or die if I eliminated vegetables, for example. What was I going to poop again if I didn't have fiber? Like what was going to happen to my cholesterol? Am I just going to drop dead of a heart attack? Yeah. And I definitely like you, like my body likes the carbohydrates and craves the carbohydrates for sure. But I realized that when I abstained from them, it was my body that felt a lot better and aches and pains went away. I was able to lose a few pounds of fat. But it also was above the neck for me where my mental clarity was much better. The anxiety that I didn't think I had dropped out and my ability to problem solve and deal with stress and, just appreciate things a lot more and be present a lot more really was quite surprising to me and really changed. And at the end of my 30-day experiment, I felt so good and it was so easy and simple to maintain that it's been now, that May 1st of 2019, I didn't change my diet. And now it's been about 5.5 years that I've eaten pretty much exclusively animals and not really eaten any measurable amount of fruits and vegetables and fiber. And I can tell you, I feel much better at age 40 than I did at age 30. I have boundless amounts of energy. I feel great. I have not gotten sniffles in 5 years. I've never gotten sick. Everything seems to feel really great. And so, it's ironic that doing the exact opposite of what people say to do has not only created, what I would consider miracles in my life, but just a countless amount of stories and miracles in everybody's lives that I get to hear about every single day. It's absolutely joyful to be able to help people with this. And that's what I've been doing. So it's weird.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So when you were first talking about how you first started to coach within the nutrition and fitness field, it sounded like there was a lot of effort and a lot of touch points. What has changed now that you focus more on the carnivore diet? What's changed in your coaching? Like, is it still that much effort or does that look different too?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is a great point. Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you an example. An example before would be you get somebody signed up for nutrition coaching. Again, the gym that I worked for was kind of a high pressure, high production, a lot of sales kind of environment. And so we were paid on commission. You're rewarded to sell a bunch of stuff, which is easy with nutrition coaching because, you can just get somebody every other week coming in. You come to the nutrition office, you might report on what you ate, or we review a tracker, and then we either have like a lesson that we'll go over, or we'll find things that you didn't do very well. We always made sure to have a box of Kleenexes in the nutrition office because it would become quite emotional with a lot of people. There was always something that you could find that somebody was not doing either correctly, they weren't doing enough, they were doing too much of. It was very hard. As much as we told people to prepare your meals, well, that takes a lot of hours on a weekend. And yeah, you might make good food that sounds good on Monday, but by Thursday, are you really going to eat the kale side salad and bag of soggy baby carrots that you set aside? Or does pizza sound pretty darn good at that point? You know what I mean? Yeah. So It was easy. It was great. You could keep somebody indefinitely on that rotating schedule. I would get paid a lot of money. I would see that person every other week, and you just find whatever thing you want to nitpick and say they didn't do well enough. And it wasn't on intention that we were telling people that they weren't doing it well enough, but that was the nature of it and what we were coached on. And
Right.
again, it was just an endless ability to be able to do that. Now, when I work with somebody, we always offer a free 30-minute consultation. Somebody might walk away with that consultation with already 2 or 3 things that they can be working on by themselves. We don't sell packages where I keep somebody on a recurring schedule because I would have to cancel that package sometimes after 2 or 3 sessions, a few half-hour sessions where somebody might ask me some questions, be curious about different things like, hey, you said I could have as much salt as I wanted. I'm having a lot of salt. Am I going to die? Or, people ask about the fiber thing, or they might ask about, are they eating too much fat? But in a very short amount of time, people tell me like, yeah, I feel pretty good. I've already fixed a lot of the problems. I'm losing weight pretty effortlessly and I don't feel hungry anymore. So I'll just call you when I need you again. And inevitably I never get called. Like somebody might be completely sorted out after like 2 or 3 sessions. I might text them like a month or 2 later, like, yo, I haven't heard from you. Are you back at the ice cream parlor? Like, what's going on? Like, no, I'm just eating a lot of steak and I feel great. So thanks. I appreciate it. It's so different. Touch points is a great way to say it. Like, there's just so much less I have to do. It's more like I just need to be there in the beginning to help validate what a lot of people might already intuitively know. Like, you might know that, like, yeah, I ate the bread and I got bloated and I feel like crap. And when I had an omelet over the weekend and ate it with bacon, for whatever weird reason, I wasn't hungry for like 10 hours and I stopped snacking and I felt okay. It was fine. I didn't die. So a lot of times my work with coaching is not necessarily like, oh, you should do this, 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 and this. It's more like you're, workshopping things and reassuring people and that kind of thing. And so it's so different. It's so different. And I might make less money by coaching, less sessions, but I can tell you I sleep a lot better now than I did then when you're just not getting your clients any help. And now it's like you're getting everybody help. It's fantastic. It's such a better way.
That's awesome. And so I think you've already kind of touched on it, but, and I want to also touch into the movement part of what you do as well, because diet and movement are 2 of the most critical keys to being able to raise our energy for anything that we're trying to do, whether we're working on something physically or whether we're working on something professionally, or whether you're like you, where your professionalism is in physical work. Those 2 are the most important keys that I've seen. You've got to have diet dialed in to be able to move as much as you need to. How important is it really, Casey, to have the diet that you need for your body?
Great question. I don't even start talking about movement or exercise in the way that we think about exercise until somebody feels like they have the energy to be able to address that. Mm-hmm. So I think what a lot of people are experiencing is a feeling of burnout, of low energy, of staying up too late, and then the alarm clock rings and you wake up and you feel terrible. So what is the best way to feel great? You have a quick pick me up, something with some sugar in it, something with, a boost that gives you some energy, some short-term energy that then causes a crash. And you find that people are on this like up and down energy cycle every single day, needing to catch up on sleep on the weekends. Or I don't know if you know anybody who partied a little too much in their corporate careers, but that can sometimes happen. You might know somebody who dabbled.
Yeah, I may have done that a time or two.
A time or two, maybe. And I did too. Like that's what you get into, and you realize like this is a lack of energy. You don't have any energy, which is this weird thing because again, as humans, we are incredible animals at storing fat. We're really, really good at storing fat energy. So it's like I use this energy quite a bit where it's like if you saw, say, a tanker of gasoline on the freeway, and you could assume that the big tanks of gasoline in the tanks is unleaded gas. But the diesel tank that it's running on is actually a diesel fuel. It would be kind of funny to see that this diesel tanker with tons and tons and tons of fuel on board is off the side of the road because it ran out of diesel gas. Wouldn't it be cool if you had some type of hybrid engine that could then burn on the unleaded gas? It could burn that off. And now it's never going to run out of energy because it's got all the energy it needs. Yet that tanker of unleaded gas is completely out of energy because it ran out of diesel fuel. And that's what we do. When we eat carbohydrates in an unnatural way, in an artificial way, which is to say that we have carbohydrate energy available around us all the time, all year, 365 days out of the year, from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. I mean, I'm talking like I spent time with my in-laws a few weeks ago, and these toddlers were waking up, and the first thing in their hand that I saw was Rice Krispie treats.
Oh,
And it's juice box and cookies and crackers and pasta and more cookies and fruit all day long. We just have never been in that kind of environment where that type of a food was available for us all the time. Carbohydrates come in a form that is the way a plant makes a food for us, and usually like a fruit or maybe some grains or some honey made by bees or whatever. But it's extremely seasonal in most places of the planet, and even very lush tropical areas. They don't just have lots of plants growing around for us to use them. Well, we have hybridized our fruits. We've made them much bigger. We figured out refrigeration. We figured out transportation. We figured out storage. Most apples that you find at any store are they've already been picked over a year ago by the time they're in the store for you to get them. And we're able to do that now. And that's saying, talking about like healthy, what we would call healthy things like fruits and vegetables. That's to say nothing about how we've refined sugar, shipped it all over the world, how we've taken grains, refined them as well, gotten rid of all the parts of these grain seeds, these grass seeds, and only preserved the white flour, which is completely nutrition devoid and acts the same way as sugar inside the body. And we've also introduced vegetable oils. So these are oils that are derived from seeds that go through this crazy chemical process that first created the first food of its kind called Crisco that made it into our food system, and now is one of the largest percentages of calories that we consume, which is vegetable oils, which come not one little drop from vegetables. No one little ounce of vegetable oil you've ever seen in your life has ever come from a vegetable. They come from seeds, and all of these things cause huge problems, especially in the quantities and the availability that they are in today. You can't hardly get away from any of these foods. And so when they're causing all of these destructive health issues, the best thing that you can do is say, like, look, I may need to abstain from some of these things and go get myself back on the normal human diet, which is eating a high amounts of proteins and fats. We need the protein to help rebuild our tissues. We need the fats to be able to use for energy. And those come in a perfect form when we're finding our food from animals and things like eggs and dairy products and, the cows and elk and all this stuff we always have eaten in through our evolution. And again, maybe have some kind of stepping away from all these other foods that are highly addicted, they're highly processed, and cause things like insulin resistance, which just creates tons of disease and makes you reliant on that energy. So we're going back to that energy source. Again, imagine we redesigned that diesel engine to work on a hybrid fuel, and it can work on both unleaded and diesel. That is teaching your body to burn the fat again. And we can't do that when we're consuming carbohydrates all the time. But if you take that fuel source away after a short journey of not feeling that great and adapting to the new fuel source, your body finds all of that wonderful fat fuel that you've already stored, and it just starts to get rid of it. And every little part of your life can improve. Your energy is always there. It's not dependent on you eating all the time. You have the fat. Once you're burning it, it's like being hooked up to a battery that you just get endless amounts of perfectly metered out energy for exactly what you need. I get perfect energy in a fasted state, whether I'm lifting weights, playing ice hockey at a very high intensity, or going on a walk, or training all my clients all day. I don't need to eat. I don't think about food. I haven't eaten anything all day. I feel great. It's 2 p.m. around where I am. It's because I'm burning fat. And it's it's our birthright. It's what we have been given as a species. And we have invented ways to just throw that in the trash and run an emergency fuel burning system and throttle it all the time. And we get tired and we get brain fog. And then we develop diabetes and dementia and Alzheimer's and get amputations. It's terrible. And heart disease. We never fixed heart. The one thing the diet was supposed to fix is heart disease. It's the number one killer in America. It still kills more people. That was the one thing we tried to avoid. It's bananas. It's just so crazy. But all of it, the great news is all of it can be reversed and fixed, and people will not profit off you anymore. So, yeah,
yeah.
Get a little worked up about this.
No, and I love your passion around that. That's why I wanted to have you back, is so people hear this and hear. So the biggest takeaways I'm hearing in what you're saying is the old way of doing things took a lot more effort. It was really easy to get burned out, and you didn't get the results that you wanted. Whereas you shift into more of a low carb model, whether with or without vegetables, depending on your belief system. And one of the thoughts that you introduced to me in the past that really helped me with this was, in order for us to live, something else has to die. Either it's a plant or an animal. But that is the nature of everything on this planet. Whether it's a plant or an animal, it has to eat something else in order to live, period. That's just the nature of being on Earth. And so the sooner we can wrap our head around that something's going to die for you to live, it gets easier to sit in your body. And you can also start to give gratitude for the animals and the plants that are fueling your body as well. But what I'm hearing there is a massive time saver and a boost in motivation, a boost in energy, and a boost in productivity and confidence that this is actually going to work.
Yes. And again, I see it with myself and I see it with people all the time. Again, the reliance on things like caffeine, drugs and alcohol, sugar in particular, highly addictive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
People can't imagine going an afternoon without having their 3 p.m., latte with a few spoonfuls of sugar, let alone, I don't know what it's like about around you, but like my valley in the Salt Lake Valley here in Utah has pretty much literally a soda shop on every corner where you can buy a giant soda that's pumped with artificial ingredients, like more than just a soda. It's got syrups and whatever, and you eat that with a sugar cookie, and they're incredibly popular, especially at the times between meals around 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. People can't imagine what it would be like to go about their life and enjoy a vacation or, get busy with stuff they want to accomplish at work and not really need to eat food because they're burning fat as a fuel. It is giving them the perfect fuel that their brains need, that their muscles need. You're reducing all these inflammatory foods that we get from the carbohydrates and the refined grains and all the seed oils. Now your body's feeling better. Your injuries are reducing. I've seen arthritis reverse itself, the gut issues that everybody deals with, IBS, IBD, leaky gut, Crohn's disease. You fix that. People realize that actually fiber may have been causing a lot more damage than it was actually causing to begin with. And a lot of people notice that if they drop their fiber down or fully eliminate their fiber, they actually digest their food way better. They're not wasting things that are just passing through our guts. You're using everything that you are consuming. So yeah, it is just a totally different way of looking at things. And I really appreciate the way you mentioned kind of not just the nutrition side of things. Like that's one bucket and that's really important, but it gets a little deceiving when you're talking to somebody who's promoting a plant-based diet and they'll switch into the ethical arguments and then the planetary arguments, which are both very poor, but they'll have to make that distinction. At some point, you have to back yourself into where do you want to accept the sentience of life? Where do you want to say that life is precious and life doesn't really matter? Because when you do that, you have to accept that any plant foods are highly destructive to the planet. They cause mass murder of all kinds of different plants, animals, insects, rodents, you name it, to harvest them, ship them, whatever. And you have to decide, where's the line? Is a cow okay? Like, are rodents okay to kill as you're running a combine through a cornfield and you're killing all the rodents and birds that live there? Plant-based people know this. What about the sentience of plants? Like, I really would encourage somebody to read a book like The Most Delicious Poison that talks all about botany and plants and how plants prepare toxins and chemicals to protect themselves, but they also communicate with each other and they share resources and they also compete with each other. And like, they're living creatures that have been on this gondab planet for way longer than animals like us have. And they are very smart. And if you are killing a plant, we have this like such entitled thing that we can just modify plants to have tons of sugar or take the seeds out of them, or we can just go out and eat whatever plants that we desire at any time without any thought to preparation, without thinking like, wait a second, are we eating a plant's babies or their ability to reproduce? Like, what are the repercussions of something like this? And the answer is it's not nothing. Like, plants fight back. They have abilities to fight insects and small rodents and keep things from eating them, and they can accumulate and be problematic for us. And again, all the while, as we're considering the ethics of things, we have to understand that something has to die for us to live. That is the uncomfortable nature of our existence on this planet. But once you accept that, I'll steal the words from a really great writer. Her name is Lierre Keith, who wrote a book called The Vegetarian Myth. She was vegan for 20 years to her own detriment. She completely wrecked her health. And she said the day she realized that truth, that something has to die for her to live, the line that she created to separate herself from what was sentient and what was non-sentient became a circle that included all of it. And she was able to walk that line and walk away from the idea that she just really did not want to harm any plants or animals at all. And so it's uncomfortable. It's not the best. I think it's really an ego thing that we think of, that we're so special and so smart that we can do whatever we like without having any repercussions on the environment or on other plants or the planet. And that's just not the case. And as soon as we realize that, the more we can be more grateful for our food, and whatever diet somebody wants to eat, they can consume it and understand that there were lives that were taken to be able to give us our food as well.
Yeah, and I really like that we're going into this, because this is a big conundrum for a lot of people. And I just want to put it out there. Like I'm actually doing modified carnivore right now, which means the bulk of my calories are coming from meat, which until I met with Casey a couple weeks ago, I didn't realize I was doing modified carnivore. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of am. Went back to that because I went into that book from Dr. David Ludwig, loved it, really gave me a lot of the science, but the meal plan, I'm like, I don't have the time to do this. I'm a business owner. I'm getting my business into a sustainable format. I'm shifting a lot right now. I don't have the time. And I mean, I have the time, but I do not want to take my spare time on a weekend and spend half of a Sunday doing meal prep for the week. Because exactly like you said, by the time Thursday gets around, I'm not going to want the shit I made on Sunday.
Right.
But with carnivore, modified carnivore, like I've got some ham and some little mozzarella balls that I got at Costco. So I've always got something. So if I'm hungry, I've got little things I can eat. I've got some nuts. With my body, I like to have some plants in the summer. In the winter, I'll probably go back to full carnivore because that actually feels really good for me.
Cool.
This was trial and error to find it. I am a huge, huge animal lover. And a lot of people, when there isn't a face attached to it, we can tell ourselves there isn't consciousness. And I'm sorry, but you're lying to yourself. They have done study after study about how plants actually have consciousness. How would they work together and be stronger to go together if they did not have consciousness?
That's right.
It's just easier if there isn't a face attached to it. But there have been studies where if you're mean to plants, the plants will die.
Yep.
If you're nice to them, there's gardens that you can actually go to and talk to the plants, and the plants are all thriving because all these plant lovers come in and talk to them all the time. So the plants are friggin' gigantic because they're responding to all this love. And so if you're a vegan and you're hearing this, I hope you're thanking your plants as you're eating them, because you're probably also eating them alive because they're fresh and they haven't been cooked or anything else. So it's actually live. Your fruit is alive. Your lettuce is alive. Just let yourself think about that for a minute. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
And for me, it's the ease of it. And when I heard the stat through this app I've been following, which I love, which I'll have other episodes about another time, this Heroic app, but they went into this whole piece, and now I'm starting to lose my train of thought there. They went into a whole piece about all the complexities of diet and finding what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And what it really came down to that blew my mind was that 99% of diets fail. That was the stat that, like, and he's even giggling as he's going over. He's like, I love it when my experts all contradict each other. And there's a whole bunch, like you can have a whole bunch of data around the pros of veganism. You can have just as much data around the pros of carnivore. There's literally nothing overlapping in those two diets, but yet there's tons of data to support them. So find what works the best for your family. But that 99% failure rate, as soon as I heard that, I'm like, I'm going to go for the 1%. So what do I need to do to be able to sustain this over time? And it was fine. And you gave me great guidelines on that, Casey. So I eat roughly, like, I don't remember what the macros come out to, but fat is the bulk of the calories, then protein, then carbs. So carbs are less than 100 grams of carbs a day, or whatever the measurement is in there. So it's pretty low. And I was training for the half marathon, and I was in carb load. I had the goo, I had all this stuff, and couldn't change in the middle of that because your body needs, 3 to 4 months to adapt to low carb, Casey?
Yeah, if you're an athlete, it can take that long. So yeah, it's uncomfortable to change over when you're in the middle of the season, for sure.
Yeah, and even not being in the middle, it's uncomfortable. I'm just now starting to get my pace about 6 weeks into it. I'm starting to get back that pace that I was in before. So I'm like, yeah, my body's burning fat. But I've also been consciously teaching it. So there's ways to do that, staying in it's a whole other episode, but there's ways to do that. And I'm going to encourage you to reach out to Casey to learn how to train your body to burn fat versus taking up more time talking about it. But making that transition. So I thought I was going to lose a bunch of weight training for this half marathon. I maybe lost a pound or two.
Yep.
Maybe. And since that, I started the diet. Let me think. On June 11th, it's July 23rd, and I've lost about 12 pounds.
Yeah. Remarkable.
Yeah.
And not even a surprise. Like, it should be, according to any certification I've ever gotten that talks about nutrition in the traditional way, is that's impossible. No, you just lost a bunch of water. And I validate this on body fat scales all the time. I see it all the time, and people lose fat that quickly. No question.
Yeah. And I feel amazing. So that's the most important thing, is my sleep wake cycle is dialed in. I'm working out 6-7 times a week. And one of those is a light day. Sometimes not. Like last week, I actually, according to my Oura ring, I hit my activity goal every day. And
Nice.
so I didn't really have the lightest day last week, but I've got the energy to do it. And the energy is sustained. And I had a little bit of a dip in energy, which was actually from a sleep supplement, not from the diet. But it's so easy. And for all of you fast moving professionals that are like, I don't have the time for this shit, you don't. So find the easiest diet for you. And just some other stories to validate what you're talking about. A friend of mine who doesn't know that he's being mentioned on here, but he's posted on Facebook. He's been doing the carnivore diet for the last year. He's lost 100 pounds. He doesn't look anywhere like the guy. I didn't even know he had 100 pounds to lose.
Wow.
And a couple of friends of mine who were very big into the vegan lifestyle started to switch and do carnivore and keto carnivore. And again, the husband has lost 30 pounds. I didn't know that he had 30 pounds. Like, he is just ripped.
Wow.
He looks amazing. Both of them do, and they feel amazing. And he was like, wow, I put my 10-year vegan diet in the trash and started to eat meat. And this is what's happening. And I'm sleeping better and I'm feeling better. And he looks phenomenal. Both of them too. They're both beautiful. They're just beautiful human beings inside and out. But they're just in these ripped bodies now. I'm just like, who are you? Like, go you. You look amazing. Like, wow. It's incredible.
Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. And again, I hear stories like that every day. Somebody might be hearing this for the first time and thinking like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense whatsoever. They're not eating any vegetables. How are they not, again, dying, or how are they feeling so good just eating one thing? And it's like, I'm not surprised at all. And in fact, one of my favorite examples, I talk about this all the time, Katie. You and I did a conversation, or I believe it was the conversation we did on your show. And I took over as podcast host for a question, just said like, how are you feeling? How's it going? You listed off probably 10 different benefits of all these things you noticed. We ended the conversation. We got off. It was maybe 5 or 6 minutes later. And afterwards you go, shit, I forgot to say I lost all this weight. Like, I completely forgot. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I was like, oh man, I didn't even tell him about the weight loss part. And it was like 10 pounds or something that had dropped.
It was a lot. It was a lot in a short amount of time. And like, what way of eating, and I won't call it a diet, but like, what way of eating is that? That's the thing that you forgot about. There's all these other things that you want to talk about. You forgot that you just lost this insane amount of fat in no time. Like, it's the only way you could do that. And I couldn't agree more with what you are. I think this is really important. What you're saying about, again, people that are already busy, they are already at the limit. Let's give them a bunch of meal plans and recipes and all this stuff. And like, for as much as I love cookbooks, I've got a few behind me with recipes and fancy stuff. Like, that is not my day. My day is training my clients, having conversations like this, editing my own podcast, which we do 3 and sometimes 4 days a week. It's spending time with my wife. It's going paddleboarding and cycling and playing hockey, all the things that I love to do. That's the main part of my life. And like, as much as I spent so many years saying like, I love food, I love shopping for food, I love trying different ingredients, and maybe I did at the time, what I love now is to have the minimum effective food ready to go for me that I can just eat and is absolutely delicious. So right off the bat, when you're eating proteins and fats, you maybe for the first time will become satiated. Satiation is not the same as fullness. You can have a salad with some chicken. You'll stop eating that salad with chicken maybe in a while because you'll be full, right? Like, all right, I'm good on food. I don't need any more. 2 hours, 3 hours later, you might be famished for food, very, very, very hungry because you were not satiated, you were full. Satiation means I might have like the final bite of a ribeye that is delicious, was so good, so good, so good. I've got one bite to go and I bring it up to my mouth and I cannot make myself take a bite, and it goes to one of my dogs. And it's like, that is true satiation. And once you achieve satiation, now you can go a very, very long time without feeling hunger. But again, without hunger, you don't need to be eating. You're in a state where the body is using the fuel that you just ate, the fats and proteins, and then it learns how to burn the fat that's already there. So right off the bat, I might be eating once or maybe twice a day, where I was eating 3 meals plus 3 snacks plus a few desserts every single day. The energy and time to do that is vastly different. And then again, like when we think about recipes, we think about, what's our side, what ingredients go into the main dish, how we're going to make it taste a certain way. Once you change your way of eating, your taste buds really change. A very common dinner for me is steak, salt, and I either cook it in a sous vide or I put it in a special like oven that heats up to 1500 degrees and chars both sides within 90 seconds. And I don't eat it with any sauce. If there's a sauce I use, it's butter. And I melt butter and this fatty cut of meat. It is so rich and delicious and yummy on its own. You don't need a side dish. You don't need other seasonings. You don't need to make it a big deal. That's a meal. Another meal that I really love is called scrambled eggs, and the ingredients are eggs. You take eggs and you crack them and you scramble them and you put them in a pan and you move them around. And in 20 minutes, you have this really indulgent recipe called scrambled eggs, ingredient eggs. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so easy. Like when you were saying like Costco has mozzarella cheese and ham, or you could have deli meat and cheese rolled up or whatever. Like there's so many really simple options. And in that sense, like if you establish like some boundaries, whether you decide to do carnivore, whether you just decide to at least focus on more of your animal proteins and fats and eat them together, you might find that one day your intuition is telling you that salmon sounds delicious. And it is. Maybe the next day salmon doesn't sound so good anymore, but like chicken thighs sound really good. And chicken thighs is like, you take chicken thighs, you put them in your air fryer for 30 minutes and you have an amazing meal and you eat them with the skin on. It's delicious and whatever. And that might not sound that good the next day. So maybe the next day's burger patties or whatever. But that's the recipe. Like there's nothing you need to add to something that's already complete, has everything we need. It has nothing we don't. It gives you all the nutrition you could possibly ask for. That's it. And you can just make it so simple on yourself. Again, whether you do a stricter version or whether you're just going to push into this and just try to get a little bit more, it's way easy.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that too. So I want to touch on one last piece that's kind of important to the energy thing and to the body cleanup, right? Especially if people are coming out of these high toxic level diets with a lot of carbs, like there's going to be a lot of crap for your body to clean up on that side. So what are some of the benefits of intermittent fasting, and what's a way someone can kind of tiptoe into that?
I love that question. Right off the bat, whenever I'm talking about fasting, I feel like I need to be very clear on what we talk about as far as what is fasting, what is intermittent fasting, what is time restricted eating. I will just say that fasting is the time between your meals. If you eat at 8, and then, you eat again at 2. If you don't eat anything between that time, 8 and 2, you were fasting in that period of time. So right off the bat, when people say like fasting is difficult or dangerous, I would just say like, is sleeping dangerous? Like, do you need to wake up every 2 hours to eat? Because most people can sleep a few hours and be okay and don't die. So you were fasting when you did that, unless you're sleepwalking and tearing out your kitchen that nobody knows about, whatever. So I just consider fasting any of the time between meals. And some people might talk about extended fasting where they're going a very long time without food, maybe a day or 2 days or 3 days. I kind of think of it as like, if I call it time restricted eating, it's kind of a nicer term and doesn't sound as harsh. And it's like anything within 24 hours is usually totally fine. One of the benefits of fasting is you're not continuously bringing in more stuff into your body. If you're always bringing stuff into your body, you always have kind of like stuff that you can make things out of, like amino acids being like building blocks of proteins. If you're getting new ones of those put in all the time, you might like build up with some amino acids that aren't really doing what they need to do, but they're kind of junk in the background and they don't really affect things. So your body can actually recycle them and use them when you're not getting as much of the new materials coming in. So my favorite example of this is, imagine that you are building a building and every day you get a new delivery of bricks to build your building. When you break a brick, and you know that you're getting new bricks every single day, you don't care. You just throw it in a pile in the back and say like, yeah, these are all broken bricks. These are good for nothing. But if the delivery stopped all of a sudden, eventually you'd run out of bricks and you'd have to say like, oh my goodness, now what am I going to do? You might remember like, okay, I've got those broken bricks on the back. Maybe I can deal with them and be a little bit more resourceful. And you might recycle a brick and say like, okay, well, these two are broken, but if I, do some work on them and I patch them together, well, that actually makes one really good brick and I can build on that. And thus the body goes through this process, and it's called autophagy. So auto, self, phagy, eat. It's eating itself. And I would say if anybody thinks this sounds weird, like go online and search before and after pictures from people that do intermittent fasting. And you'll see an after picture where it looks like the person has never really been overweight, even though they lost a tremendous amount of weight. Their skin is tight. They don't really have as many stretch marks. Their body recompositions in a proper way. You might argue that somebody who is not eating 3 meals a day, they might not be getting an adequate amount of protein. Like somebody might be only eating maybe 100 grams of protein because they're only eating once a day. But when we take into consideration that the body is recycling proteins all the time, it might even reduce the amount of protein that you need to eat. So there's so many different benefits to it. The autophagy is one of my favorite benefits to it. So somebody might be thinking like, yeah, I do want to clean stuff out. That would be your body's innate way to be able to do that. I've heard a lot of stories of things being left in people after surgery that eventually like kind of disintegrated and dissolved because the body is recycling things. I've lots of evidence with things like cancer. It might sound a little bit controversial, but a main primary fuel source for cancer is glucose. So already, if you're not eating a lot of glucose, I've heard tons of stories of people's tumors shrinking and then being, cut out with surgery and not needing chemotherapy or radiation. Again, that might sound a little controversial, but it's being done. People are doing it. So there is, anecdote of people experiencing that. And so that's, it's all really beneficial. And again, like talking about the convenience, the cost, the time, the energy that goes into your food already. Like if I'm, again, going on vacation, I know I only need to eat once a day. Well, that's just more time I get to go explore and have fun and enjoy my life and enjoy vacation. You asked how to step into it. And I would say the best way to step into it is, as we recommended before, again, whether you decide you want to try a carnivore diet fully, strictly or not, you could start by getting more proteins and fats in the diet and just start with that rather than think, about how every diet thinks and wants you to think is like restriction. You can't eat any of these foods. Like, why don't you embrace foods that are absolutely delicious? You've been told have been bad for you for so long. Like, have the eggs and cook them in butter. That's really good. Have the bacon with your omelet and have an avocado if you want. It's delicious. Like, have the steak and salt it properly and just eat it the way that it is. Like, it's really, really good. You can do that. You're not going to die. You can try for your next meal and just, don't have the rest of the stuff, but focus on the proteins and fats. You will be so full that fasting is the natural reaction. It's what happens afterwards. And all of a sudden you might notice that you're going like these weird amounts of time without eating. And you're not doing it on purpose. You're not forcing it, but you might have an omelet for breakfast and eat until you're really full. And it might be 2 or 3, or you may get hungry and then like you get busy and you're not hungry anymore. Like, it passes over time. You can try any of those things. And as long as you're pushing out, your meal timing more and more and more and more, you're not going to die. The body's burning the fat that it already has. It's using that as the energy source. You're less reliant on the food. Intermittent fasting is now, in my opinion, like a gold standard for something that's going to give somebody really great health. It's going to burn off excessive amounts of glucose in the body. It's going to burn body fat. It's going to provide energy to all the tissues in the body that need it, including the brain, the heart, and all the other organs that we have. And the thing that I noticed when I go back to what I was doing before in my career, when I was measuring metabolism, how many calories can somebody eat? If you deliberately deprive your body and eat less calories, your body will react. It will slow its metabolism down to match the new lower number of calories that you're burning, and you're going to burn less calories. It's what happened to every Biggest Loser contestant that ever did the show. They studied this. If you do the opposite, where you just start fasting, you're naturally not eating as much, but your body is then burning its fat from fuel. You might be eating less, but your body actually increases its metabolic rate. People start fasting and they don't feel cold or depleted or with cravings. They feel warm and energetic and like wow, this is amazing. Or they'll be really frustrated that they wake up at 3 a.m. and they can't go back to sleep. And they'll be like, oh, my sleep sucks now. And it's like, really? Does your sleep suck? Or did you wake up at 3 with tons of energy and now you don't need a nap and you were super productive during the day after 6 hours of sleep? And they're like, oh, yeah, it was kind of the latter one. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's the best. You're just using your own body's resources to run the battery, and it uses them up quite well. It's phenomenal. That's my gold standard thing that I think works the best for everybody. But the catch is, if you're eating lots of carbohydrates, you're having your blood sugar fluctuate up and down and up and down and up and down all day. You don't have the ability to fast without being an ogre or a troll. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be a terrible human. You're going to be hangry. You're going to be pissy at your coworkers. Like, don't even try it. Focus on the fats and proteins, eat them until you're fully satiated, and then see how long you can go without feeling hungry again. And that is true intermittent fasting.
That is awesome. That's actually a great note to wrap. I was going to say, like, what advice would you want to leave the audience with? But I think you just gave them absolutely amazing advice. So for anybody who wants to tune in their diet, give yourself patience and grace. It's July right now. So maybe you want to aim for summer next year, but also start getting interested in feeling better now. It's not just how you're going to look in the future. Have an immediate goal, because your future self isn't going to buy it for a while. So you want to be feeling better. So have that be your primary motivation to start to make these changes. And like Casey said, the protein and fat, just start adding more in and have those before you have the carbohydrate, and then see how much of the carbohydrate you actually want after that.
I love it. Yeah, that's great advice.
Thank you. Just learning from you, Casey. So where can people find you? And we'll make sure that we have all the important links in the show notes as well, so that anybody who wants to do a consultation with you can reach out and book with you. I highly recommend that you do that. It is 30 minutes of your time. Casey will give you an amazing advice. He made it so much easier for me. Like, I wasn't even giving myself credit for what I had done right. Like, I hop on the phone with him and I'm like, well, I did blah, 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 blah. And I've lost 8 pounds and da, 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 da. What do I need to do differently? And he's like, well, first of all, whatever you're doing is working. I'm like, oh, that didn't even occur to me.
You don't need me for anything. It sounds like you're doing pretty darn good.
Well, you had already taught me before. So, I mean, and that's, again, it's much to your point that it was super, super easy to go back into this. I'm like, I immediately went back to when we had talked at the beginning of, when was it? It must have been in 2022, I think was the last time we had. But so 2 years later, I still kept your advice with me. And I was able to, I don't even remember. But I mean, it's been well over a year, probably 2 years since we had those initial conversations. It's like, all right. And so I just started tracking macros because that felt doable in my schedule, whereas all the meal prep, that did not. But the macros, then I found an app, it's literally called Stupid Simple Macros. Like, I get no buy-in to try it, and it is stupid simple. They make it so easy to do.
Love it.
Then you put your fasting window in, your water, and you just look. And so I can check real quick. So my 12 pounds of weight loss has been with stuff that shouldn't work. Let me just take this really quick. So all right, so I typically have 64.4% of my calories are fat, 20.2% is protein, and 15.4% is carbs. And I've lost 12 pounds, and I turned 50 in October.
That's epic. I love it.
Oh, and my hair's getting thicker too.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's been falling out for years. I had not, I'm laughing now because of all the things that I've tried. I never thought, let me try go low carb diet to see if my hair starts growing in again. And surprise.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
They find you, Casey.
Yeah. Well, Katie, like I said, it's such a pleasure to chat with you. Again, I didn't do very much in that coaching session, so congratulations to you for finding the way. The easiest place for people to go is just our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. All the resources are there. They can find some of our social accounts. They can find our YouTube. They can find our podcast called Boundless Body Radio. We do a few episodes a week, like I said. We also, there's a page that has a seminar that I've been teaching in my neighborhood that I mentioned that has all kinds of different lessons and recordings, outlines, meal plans, different resources are there. Anybody can find that. That's all for free. I'm just giving that all away. And then the very first thing that people will see on our website is a button that says book now, where, they can go in and select a time in your own time zone around the world, a time and day that we can chat. I tell people on my podcast all the time, like, whether or not you want to talk about nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, whatever, carnivore, or I even love it when people just, want to introduce themselves and share their story with us and just chat. We're always open to do any of that. And that's always free, offered on our website. So again, that the website is myboundlessbody.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. I'll make sure we have that in the show notes. And thank you again for joining me. I love getting to talk to you. I learn something every time. And you gave me some good analogies, some good tips to take with me from today, as usual.
Well, thank you so much for the honor. It was great to chat with you again.
Awesome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, and viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube. And we will see you soon. Take care until then.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and leave a 5-star review, which helps grow the podcast and reach others just like you. While you're at it, connect with Katie on social media. You can find her on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as @CoachKTDubs. That's CoachKTDubs. This has been the Catapult Effect with Katie Wrigley. Thanks for listening.